Okay, so good evening to everyone that has joined us, all the attendees. This is an informal town hall meeting regarding the Town Center North overlay. We have tonight Claudia Hasman, she's our Planning and Zoning Director, and Celia Vargas, our consultant. So the way that this is going to work is it'll be a presentation, obviously, and it's going to have some public engagement and public participation. So the different ways that the public can participate will be through various methods. First and foremost, there is a chat function that will be available to all attendees. Any messages that are sent via that method will be seen by the panelists only, and they will be answered at the end of the meeting during the Q&A session. There's also a raise hand function that the attendees can use to raise their hands so that they can ask their questions. But again, that will be addressed at the end of the meeting. Then in addition to that, we also made available public comment speaker cards. And those comments and questions that were submitted prior to the start of this meeting will also be addressed at the end of the meeting. And then in addition, as the presentation goes along, Sylvia will have some slides that are interactive, and there will be either a poll that can be answered, or it'll be some post-its that can be pasted on the screen and that will be shown on Sylvia's screen that she will share with everyone. So then with that, I will turn it over to Claudia.
Hello and welcome everybody. As Mauricio said, I'm Claudia Hasman, the Planning and Zoning Director for the City of Sunny Isles Beach. And my team and I are very happy to have you participating during this town hall. As you know, we need your envisioning for the future of the Town Center North area. So we are hoping that you enjoyed all the tools that we are using tonight, so you can and you are able to fully participate during the town hall meeting. Once again, thank you for your participation. And as Mauricio has explained, Sylvia Vargas, our consultant, and her team from Calvin Giordano Associates has been leading this project. So to walk us through tonight's presentation, I will have Sylvia to continue with the presentation. Thank you so much.
Sylvia, you're muted.
You're muted, yeah.
Thanks, Claudia and Mauricio, and thank you for having me again tonight. As Claudia and Mauricio mentioned, my name is Sylvia. I am a principal planner with Calvin Giordano and Associates, and it's been my distinct pleasure to be helping the Sunny Isles Beach community with the engagement for this project. So I'm going to jump right in. There will be some repetition of the instructions that Mauricio mentioned at the beginning. Repetition is good in these cases. If some of you have participated before, there may be also some repetition of information. So I apologize for that, but we need to make sure that people who have not participated before, for whom this workshop is primarily designed, have the same background. I ask you to bear with me, appreciate your patience. So now I'm going to jump in, sharing my screen. Let's see how this goes. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
All right, thank you. You'll notice, Mauricio, I'm not wearing my my earphones today, although I am wearing my necklace, so hopefully.
And it's very pretty.
Noises. So I'm gonna jump right in. Let me see. Let's go here. Before I even give you our agenda for tonight, I want to make sure that we're all of the same understanding about which area we're talking about. I'm sure that many people who have joined us tonight have done so because they are interested in this particular topic. But perhaps not everybody knows exactly what the area is, what the area entails. And so just wanted to give you a brief context for what we're working with. And that is a very central area in the city. It's sort of the central south region that is at the gateway in from 826 Sunny Isles Beach Boulevard from the mainland. And the boundaries are from that westbound edge, the north edge of that westbound Sunny Isles Beach Boulevard on the south to the north side of 172nd Street. And then from Collins Avenue, as you can see on the inset here, let me just go here real quick with my pointer to the intracoastal. So that's the area we're talking about. It's actually fairly small. It's only 72 acres in total land area, and is so compact that if you actually could traverse this area from let's say the Sunny Isles Beach westernmost corner to the northeasternmost corner, or the other way around, you could actually do it in about 5 minutes. Obviously, you can't really do that today because there are no internal direct connections that way, but it's a very short walk internally in any case. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So with that context, this is our agenda for tonight. Done introductions. I'm just going to give you one very brief background on myself so you understand why it is that I'm doing this. We're going to talk about the goals for our meeting tonight, our objectives that we wish to accomplish. And then I'm going to enter into a little bit more detail than Mauricio gave with regards to the activities that we're going to do tonight. Then I'll give you a brief recap of our process, where we've been, what we've been doing. And we're going to spend some time reviewing what we're calling our strategies, which are 4 options that we have identified as viable for the City Commission to consider. And you will have an opportunity to discuss those through an interactive online tool, as well as to vote on them. Hopefully, by the end of our discussion, you'll have a good understanding of what these entail, and your vote will be informed. And then we'll just talk about the steps that follow this workshop, and we'll go into the Q&A, which, as Mauricio said, you will have an opportunity to submit questions throughout the presentation, as well as through other means. We'll do our best to answer all of the questions that come in. If we're overwhelmed, we may have to do a follow-up with a written Q&A, but we'll certainly try to get to all of the questions. All right, so for myself, as was mentioned, I'm a planner. My position is specifically as a principal planner with Calvin Giordano and Associates. I have been there for about 3 years now, but my career as a planner spans about 27 years of practice, working both in the public and the private sector. I have worked throughout the U.S. as well as abroad. The majority of my work has been sort of on the middle to eastern sectors of the U.S. My specialties I consider to be citywide or community-wide planning. And my passion, as well as my specialty, is in public engagement, which is the reason why I was asked to help Sunny Isles Beach with this project, which I have been enjoying tremendously, thanks in part to the team there, as well as the interactions with the community. The goals for tonight's meeting is basically fourfold. We have been doing a lot of engagement. That's what the whole purpose of this process is. But because of the pandemic, we had to make some changes to the way that we have been engaging people. And we had a pretty short time frame due to the original expiration of the moratorium. And so with that factor, kind of being put to the side in terms of having an extension, we decided that we wanted to engage even more people, provide at least one additional opportunity. In fact, we're offering several additional opportunities for more people to engage. We wanted to provide progress report to people who may not have had an opportunity to participate before. Offer additional opportunities for people to express their opinions and hopefully get more of a clear direction from that input to finalize our recommendations to the commission. So as was mentioned, we have several interactive tools that we're going to use. This is the first one. It's called Poll Everywhere. For those who may have participated in the previous virtual workshop, you may have already seen this in action. We're only going to use the online option this time, not the text option, because the same tool is going to be posted online after this meeting so that people who are not able to attend tonight are able to do so in the next few days. And in order for that to happen, only the online voting or web voting option can be used. So we wanted to sort of, have apples to apples. But as Mauricio mentioned, as we go through, the links to this and the other tools that we're going to be using are going to be posted on the chat. And I believe that is happening already. Is that correct?
That is correct. I just posted the link, so everybody, if they can go and look at the chat, they should be able to see the link.
Right. And so if you click on the link, which should be active, you can use your browser to go to the Poll Everywhere site at that location, TCNO, and you will be able to participate in the survey. The survey is going to become active in just a moment because we're going to do 2 warm-up exercises. So I'm going to go to the first one. These are, just sort of play questions to get you familiar with the tool. And so this first question is, are you a Saturday or Sunday person? Personally, I am a Saturday person because I like to have those 2 days sort of looming ahead of me. I see that so far the people who have voted are in agreement with me. I'm not sure how many we have so far. I'm going to give it a little bit more time. And then we'll move on to the next question. All right. So some people do like Sundays, lazy Sundays. All right. It's a little bit more split now. So you can see with this tool, voting in real time, the results will appear on screen. And it's very easy to use. Hopefully everybody's being able to vote without trouble. Keeps changing a little bit as more and more people are voting. Okay, so now we're a little bit more split. That's great. I'm going to go to the next question. This one is more of a free-form question. And I'm asking you, because I love getting suggestions, what is the title of the last book that you have read? So you can type in your response, whatever that may be. And I promise to make a list.
Sylvia, just as a point of clarification, whenever you are in the browser, you're going to have a blue button to your right corner that it says next. So you can move to the next question.
That is correct. Thank you for reminding me of that, because I am not looking at the same screen that you guys are. So because this is a survey that contains all of the questions that we're going to work with tonight, it will ask you to go to the next question. All right, I'm going to hope here for some great book titles. We'll give it a Just a little bit of time here. Maybe nobody wants to give me the titles of the books they're reading. I hope that nobody's having trouble with this one.
Sylvia, I submitted a title, and I don't know if you're not
Did
seeing.
you?
Yes, Sylvia, I submitted one too.
Okay. That's funny. Show responses. I don't know why it's not doing it. All right, I'm gonna get out of here just for a second and see what's going on. Let's see. Apologize for that. That's funny. It's active. Okay. Well, are we getting any comments in the chat or the Q&A that you guys can see?
No, there's no comments or questions.
Okay.
being submitted.
Well, let's just move on. Hopefully this doesn't happen with the other tool, the other polls, which are going to be more important. I don't know what is up with this, but anyway, let's try this one. The other tool that we're going to use is called Idea Flip, and it's a virtual board for posting Post-it notes. So Claudia or Jennifer are going to be dropping the active link into the chat. We're going to do a little exercise on this one that is, I'm going to be asking you to drop notes into the board with your words to live by. I'm going to get out of this to go to that site so that I can show you how this works. It's actually very easy. When you go in, it'll ask you to enter an email and a password. You can enter anything you want. It's just to create a participant login. And the way that you participate, once you're in, you see that we have some participants here already. What you'll do is you can drag a note from the stationery tray onto the board, click twice on it to edit it, and click OK. You can also double click on a note. It'll drop it on the board, and then you can do the same thing as I mentioned, click twice on it, edit it, and then OK it. All right. The other thing you can do is you can resize the notes by hitting Control over your note, and you'll see that there's a little hand. And so you drag, you can move it.
Sylvia, you're not in presentation mode on PowerPoint, so we're not seeing anything that you're.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me. You're right. I need to share this part of the screen. I apologize. I thought that I had picked my mode for. Let's see. Where did I go? Apologize for that.
While Sylvia is doing that, just make sure you can go to the chat and click at the last link to be able to go to the browser, to the web.
Can you see it now?
Okay, I'm going to post it again.
You're still not in presentation mode.
Yes, but I'm showing you my
We see the PowerPoint.
You see the PowerPoint, but not the browser?
No, yeah, not
You can't see the
what you're
browser.
editing.
That's weird. Okay, let's see.
I'm also getting some comments that it's giving an error message. So I'm testing it.
I don't know what that is happening, Mauricio, because, well, let's try this again.
Yes. To Tito and to the other participants, if you can go and click at the latest link that it was posted on the chat and see if you're able to go to the sign in page for Idea Flip.
And Sylvia, it's now showing your browser.
It's not showing my browser.
It is
Oh,
showing
it is now. It is now showing. It is now showing. Okay. All right. I'm hoping that other people, I saw that there's somebody who came in and dropped a couple, well, actually a couple of people that dropped the notes. This one is mine. But I'm going to go through, this is a really intuitive program. So for those who have been able to join, you'll see it right away. You just drag a note from the stationery tray, any note, onto the board, double click it, edit it. I'm going to copy what somebody else said and then click OK. You can move your note by just dragging it around. You can resize it by hovering above it with your cursor, holding the control key, and then dragging to resize it or move it. Hopefully people can see now how it's done. It's really easy. If you scroll down on the stationery tray, you can also see some dots and badges and buttons that you can use to maybe like other people's notes if you feel like it. And this is just a quick exercise. I'm hoping that people don't have trouble with this, but we're going to use this tool again later. And now for those who have created a login, you will just be able to click on the next link in order to go to that new board that we're going to be working on later. And you don't have to log in again. And moreover, that board that we're going to use later, because this is just a warm-up, as I said, but the one that we're going to use later is also going to be accessible for the next few days so that others who may not have the opportunity to be with us tonight can go and add their thoughts. Or if you're having trouble now, you can always go and do this exercise later. We're going to have those links added to the project webpage, which is on the city's website, and we'll talk about what that address is later. So for anyone who's not able to join us tonight, please let them know that they will be able to do the same exercises that we're doing now, or that we will be doing throughout this presentation later over the next week or so. All right. Anyone who feels like continuing this can do so, practice, but I'm going to try to get out of here and go back to my presentation right now. I'm going to, I don't know why this is not letting me share my desktop, but here we go, back to the presentation. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay, let's go back to presentation mode. How about now?
Perfect.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right, so this is Idea Flip. As Mauricio mentioned, the other two tools that we're using, some of you have been already making use of them, is the Q&A to submit your questions. You can also raise your hand. We will be keeping track of all of that, and we will use your questions, your feedback for the Q&A at the end of this meeting. All right, now, because we are doing this virtually, we have to set some ground rules. Obviously, everybody is encouraged to provide input, but we are asking you whether you are making a comment or putting a note on Idea Flip or asking a question. Please be brief, be clear, be concise, be to the point. Try to stay on the issues that we are trying to resolve tonight. We know there's a lot of different things that are of interest, and I'll walk you through what those issues are, obviously. But tonight there are some specific items that we want to focus on. If you get a chance to ask an idea, to ask a question or voice an idea, please, if you have others, try to send them in, but let others also have their turn. I'm asking everybody to be really respectful of everyone's point of view. There are no bad ideas. There are no bad comments here. So let's try to be very polite and very kind to everyone. Let's not make things personal. Let's address the issues, not the persons. Okay, so now I see that some people are already answering these questions. For those who haven't gone ahead of me, we have some demographic questions that we're asking now in order to get a sense of who is participating tonight. So the first question is, where in the city do you live? So I'm going to give it a little bit of time for people to answer these questions. Let's see if there's others that haven't answered yet. Maybe this is the total of our audience, but
just a reminder, Sylvia, I posted the link again into the chat. So
yes.
If someone
So Claudia is going to do that every time that, if we veer from this exercise and we go into presentation mode, the next time that there is a question, we have a few that are in sequence and you can use the same link. But if we veer away from the polls and then come back, Claudia is once again going to post the link. It's the same link for all of the polls, okay?
Yes.
All right, so we have...
Sorry, just to remind everybody, remember to click next at the bottom right corner.
Correct.
Yes.
So we're going to give it a few more seconds here, and then we'll move to the next slide, which is going to be the next poll, and you, the audience, should move onto and click the next button on your browser. All right, so tonight we have 13% of our respondents who live within the district, which here in this map of the city is represented by the pink area. Actually, it's not even this pink area is not just the North Town Center, but also the South, because this is from the comprehensive plan. We have 38% of the participants who live west of Collins Avenue, and 50% who live in other parts of the city or other areas outside the city, perhaps. So that is interesting. So I'm going to move on. Let's see if I can go to the next question. I see some people have participated already. So we would like to know what category you fall in. Are you a homeowner within the city? Are you a renter? Do you own a business? Do you work at a business? Do you own land or other? And you can be in more than one of these categories. Obviously, they're not necessarily all exclusive. Okay, so far from the respondents, the majority are homeowners, and many of them, 17%, work at a business within the city. I'm going to give it a few more seconds and then we'll move on. Apparently we don't have any landowners tonight. Okay. And again, if you don't get a chance to answer this while I have this on the screen, you can continue to do this. Regardless, the poll remains open. I'm going to move on to the next question. Okay, interesting. All right. So, great participation already. This is the question about the group, the age spread. We see that we have a fairly good spread in terms of covering a lot of these groups. Apparently, we don't have anyone yet in the 25 to 34-year-old group. We don't also have anyone in the 75 years old or older group. All right, I'm going to move on. Okay, again, you guys are way ahead of me. What is your main interest in the topic? Great. I'm glad to see that so many of you are here to learn about the process. That's fantastic. I appreciate that. Hopefully you will have some things to show you tonight that perhaps you didn't know. Appreciate everyone's input. I'm going to move on. If you chose other in the previous poll, you can elaborate here. We were having some kind of problem with the other free-form question similar to this. So I don't know if these are going to come in or not, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to wait too long. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on. All right, so the next section of our presentation is what I hope will be a relatively brief recap for those who have not joined us before. For those who did, and I know there's at least two of the commissioners, or at least there were at the beginning of the meeting. Sorry, this is going to be old news to you, but anyway. So our process, just to give you some background on it, is pretty simple. We had 4 major tasks that have been conducted sequentially. We did mobilization back in January with just kind of gathering data, spent a lot of time doing that because we had a section of our process that was task 2, which was technical analysis. But during task 1, we also were beginning the public participation process by talking to people in the community. We talked to a lot of stakeholders within the district, people who live there, people who own property there, people who work there. We also talked to people who are interested in this process who don't live within the district. This was our first interaction just to get a better sense of what the issues are, what the perceptions are, what the opinions are. With that done, we moved into our technical analysis. Our goal in task 2 was to create what I call the snapshot of the present for the overlay district, meaning capture what the conditions are in the present with as much fact-based evidence, fact-based information as possible. And we're going to show you some of that. With those 2 pieces completed, we were able then to go back out to the public with a series of activities to help us frame the vision of the future that people wanted to see, the vision of the future of this area, right? And in turn, that helped us to identify what the viable choices, the viable strategies could be that we could be making recommendations on to the commission. And so that has led us into the final task of that sequential process, which is task 4. This is the task where we're documenting all of our findings, all of our process. And throughout the entire process, task 5 has been our outreach to the public. It has started at the very beginning, on the very first day of the job, and it continues to today, and it will continue until the last subtask, which is going to be to make this presentation to the commission with our final recommendations, and the public will have an opportunity to speak there as well. Our public engagement is obviously the main driver of this process. This is what has framed every question that we have asked. And we set some goals for ourselves, some principles that we wanted to follow. The first one is that because there was so much controversy surrounding issues related to this area in the past, before I started this process with the city, we wanted to make sure that this was a productive and respectful forum for dialogue. We wanted to have diverse representation from all the groups in the city that have a stake in this, which is everybody, obviously. We know that the public is not a single monolithic entity. It's constituted by a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different interests, and we wanted to give all of those an opportunity to participate, which is the reason why we provided a multiplicity of those opportunities and a multiplicity of methods, so that if one of the tools did not work for you, was not convenient, then you would have others that perhaps would give you a better access or a better or a greater convenience. And more importantly, our recommendations are based on what we have been hearing from the public. So this has not been by any means an obscure process. It's been very transparent. We have been posting about what we have been hearing. In every presentation that we have made, we have been speaking about the previous steps, what people have told us, and how we have used their input to move us forward in the process. So with respect to that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we have been doing in terms of outreach and engagement. We have had a lot of different means relying on the city's existing outreach infrastructure to communicate out to the public and to receive input. In terms of engagement, one of the most important things, which is on the project website, is the comment form. Even as recently as the past couple of days after the announcement came out for this town hall, we have been receiving some input in the form of the comments, the comment form, with some really positive comments that are going to be part of our record. We have had 11 stakeholder sessions where we engaged about 38 to 40, I think, different stakeholders. We had the in-person workshop that was held in when was that? May? In March. Before that, we also had 2 pop-up outreach events that we did within the district. And then we had the virtual workshop with the commission a couple of months ago. Now this one, we had an online survey. We're going to have an online survey again. And of course, there are the public meetings that it's not to be determined. The date is set, and I'm going to tell you what that is towards the end of this presentation. But all in all, between January and June, we have had more than 530 participants. So that's been very rewarding to hear all of that input. It's been very positive. We hope to have that again tonight. So with that, we're going to go to another poll now. You have been answering already. Many of you apparently have been, who are on the line, have been participating, and I really appreciate that. So in the background there, you can see some images, a little faded, but some images from our public engagement that we've been doing, including the pop-up outreach, which we did in March at 2 locations within the district. It was hot. It was very hot. We spent the whole day out there, but it was so much fun because we got a lot of people coming to talk to us, a lot of kids who perhaps otherwise would not have participated. And let me tell you, those young people, they had very definitive ideas, and we have kept a record of that, of course, as part of everyone's input. So what you see reflected what you will see reflected in our report includes that. Okay, so about 67% of those who are here today who have responded to the poll participated. I really appreciate that. And for those who have not, I hope that this will be very informative and that you will stay engaged as we move forward, which is going to be for the next couple of months. So let's go to the next one. Some background on the district. Let me move some things here to the side, if I may. Hang on. So this area, the way that it developed, actually, very interestingly, by the time the city incorporated in 1997, there was already a lot of development there, the way that you see it today, as you can see. What was not developed already developed shortly after incorporation, within the next 2 years. This is Intracoastal, a project that was developed under county rules that sort of was grandfathered in or vested rather. But a lot of the other development was pretty much set. So there hasn't been a lot of changes over these decades in this area. And it's interesting because when the city incorporated and the comprehensive plan was developed and adopted and the zoning code followed to implement the comp plan, there was a vision that was set for this area. And when I say that area, at that moment, we're not talking just about this north side. We're talking about this area to the south of Sunny Isles Beach Boulevard as well. That was part of the original town center district, just generic town center district. And unlike the northern portion of the district, which has been pretty static because it was already developed and there was not a lot, hardly, in fact, any land vacant there. In the southern portion, there was a lot of change over the last few decades. These two areas have developed very differently. And as the history of the district has evolved, we see that because of those differences, they probably need to be treated differently. So the reason why we're doing this process is because in what was that now, Claudia? 18, right? I guess now there was a discrepancy that was discovered between the zoning code and the comprehensive plan with respect to the land use designation. That became an issue that, as we will see, actually affected in particular the southern portion, because a lot of the redevelopment that had happened over those few decades had occurred in that area. So as a result of that, the city, I'm gonna go to the next slide. I think that's where I have my history. Let me use this. I mentioned the discrepancy between the comprehensive plan and the land development regulations or the zoning code. The comp plan sets the high level policy vision for this area. The map on the right represents that vision. There are two underlying land use districts, the pink and the red that you can see. The pink is medium to high density residential, and the red is mixed use business. On the southern portion, it's basically the same with a few other pieces that are, park for the green, and I believe institutional for or public facility for the purple. The way that this was reflected in the land development regulations was to create an overall zoning district, not an overlay, which is the case in the comprehensive plan, but a zoning district for the whole district. But in the implementation of that district in the zoning code, there was a discrepancy that was not noticed until a couple of years ago, and that created the issue that we are trying to resolve now. So in discovering this discrepancy, the city had to take some immediate actions. And what have those been? The first one was to determine that the discrepancy affected only this part of the city. It did not affect any other part of the city, only this area. The second one is that more specifically, the discrepancy only affected the southern portion of the TCO because redevelopment had happened under those rules that were not consistent in the zoning code with the comprehensive plan. In the northern portion, no redevelopment had occurred, and therefore, for that reason, the discrepancy had not impacted any projects. So the first step that the city took in pursuing a solution was to impose a 1-year moratorium in zoning in progress for the whole area. And that was supposed to expire in September. It has been extended through December to allow for this additional public input that we're conducting. The second task was to immediately replace the original town center overlay that covered those two areas with two separate overlays. One for the southern portion, which now is called the town center south overlay, and is shown in this map as the hatch that goes in sort of the slanted left direction, and the town center north, which is the one that we're dealing with, which is the one that you can see with the slant, the hatch that slants towards the right.
Sylvia, I'm sorry
Yes.
to interrupt you, but
Sure.
we have a participant that is asking, and I think it's important to bring it up to the discussion. I still don't know what the discrepancy was. So if we can go over what was the discrepancy, will be best.
It is a very good point. I'm not trying to skip over the details of that, but I'm going to get into that in just a second. And I have a slide that will show you exactly what the discrepancy is. So be patient. We're going to get into that in just a second. So just to finish really quick here, once the comprehensive plan was amended with the replacement of the original TCO with these two separate overlays, the city was able to add density and intensity measures to the town center overlay in compliance, consistent with the requirements of the Florida statutes to that portion of the overlay to resolve the issue. But the same measures were not added to this north portion because at that point, there was no urgency to do that. There was no pre-existing development issue. And the city decided, hey, we have a great opportunity now to talk to people in the community about what they would like to see here, which is exactly the reason why this process that we're in emerged. So the goal of our process now is to come up with the solution for the northern portion of the district that the city has already dealt with regards to the south portion. Okay. All right. I'm going to get into the discrepancy in detail in just a second. Let me just go through a couple of things here. This is part of our snapshot of the North Overlay District as it is today. We don't have, obviously, 2020 census figures, but this is as close as we can get in terms of kind of creating a profile of who lives here today. This is 2018 data from the U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey. We have about 4,000 people that live here. There's a great majority of them that are white Latinos, about 72% that are foreign born, which is interesting when you compare it to the city. You see that the percentages are higher. The population that live within this district is about 18% of the total population of the city. So that's pretty significant. Median age, this area has a younger average median age, the lower median age than the rest of the city. As you can see, about 11 years younger than the city average. The household size in the area is also a little bit larger than the rest of the city. Interestingly, the median income is lower than the rest of the city. We also have 2,800 plus housing units, which represent about 10% of the housing stock. So it's pretty significant as an area, as a component of the overall city. We did some analysis on existing land uses and the density, not just of population, but also of development. And one of the things that we discovered is that there's a sort of a gradient of density in terms of residential development. You can see it. We have created it here in the different shades of blue. Obviously, the intracoastal development is the higher density that was developed under different rules, under the county rules that were in place prior to city's incorporation, because that project came in vested. The others are developed either in the case of the one project that developed later under the city rules, and the others that are in the lighter shades of blue in this map actually were already existing. So you can see that the average density for the entire area, for the entire residential area, is about 67 dwellings per acre. And that for all the projects, the range goes from as low as 25 to as high as 184, and 184 dwelling units per acre is actually the intracoastal project. So it's a wide range. Next, we looked at the pattern of land use and development. In the previous map, you may have noticed that there was this sort of large gray area that said non-residential. That is obviously the commercial development that exists today, which is represented in orange in this map, and it fronts on Collins Avenue. The burgundy on this map represents the residential areas, which are, behind the commercial and all the way, extending all the way to the intracoastal. And all of those are multifamily residential projects. Some of them are condominiums, some of them are rental, but they're all multifamily. So we did some calculations. About 65% of all the land in the district is multifamily. 30% of the land is commercial, 5% is green space, and that's the park on the northern edge. And 20% of all the land in the district is occupied by surface parking. That's pretty significant. We did some calculations about building height. You can see that the average number of heights in stories is 6. But 57% of the buildings are 5 stories or less, and a total of 91% of the buildings are less than 10 stories today. Many of these buildings are old. The average building age in the whole district is 37 years, and some of the buildings, particularly in the commercial area, are actually older than 50 years, and those are, as a share of all the development in the district, about 21% of the buildings. What that means is that because many of these buildings are older, at some point in an unknown future, there might be some desire to redevelop. We don't know when that might be, and there are no projects. I want to make clear that there are no projects in the pipeline for any single one of these parcels that we're talking about, okay? All right, so finally, here we come to this big table. It's going to seem very confusing, but I'm going to point you to some key facts that will show you what the discrepancy is. What you see here in these 3 columns that I'm pointing to right now is the data that pertains to the comprehensive plan. The last column here represents the regulations that are in the zoning code for this area. And this column that is highlighted represents the existing conditions with the same numbers. So in general, these columns, the 3 columns from the comprehensive plan and the zoning code, they have to be consistent. Zoning can be less, but not more than the measures that are in the comprehensive plan. So you will see that because the town center north is an overlay, it doesn't really have a density or intensity measure in it right now. But there are 2 underlying districts that I mentioned before, the medium high density residential district and the mixed use business district, that control the density and intensity today. And the base density for the medium high density residential ranges between 25 and 50 dwelling units per acre. You can get a bonus for waterfront sites that meet certain conditions. You can also get a bonus if you have affordable housing. That's neither here nor there. There are no projects like that right now. In the mixed use business, which covers, it's the red in the map that you saw before, which covers what are the current commercial properties, the base density is 25 dwelling units per acre, but you can get up to 85 dwelling units per acre through a series of bonuses. Now, obviously that's not there yet at all today, but you can see that in the zoning code, the base density is actually 60 dwelling units per acre. So that means that this density is higher than what's in the code for base. So that's what the discrepancy is. That and the fact that this doesn't have the controlling density and intensity, should have it. The Florida statutes require it, and it's not there today. Likewise, for the intensity measure, which is a way to measure primarily the amount of development in square feet, the zoning code has a base of 2.5 floor to area ratio, that's what it stands for. whereas the two underlying districts have a 2.0 floor to area ratio base. And again, the TCNO doesn't have that measure. So that's a part of the discrepancy. The building height is not in discrepancy because that is not something that is addressed by the comprehensive plan. It is addressed in the zoning code. So that's not an issue here. But I did want to point you to what the existing conditions are today. So the actual average density that we talked about before that exists already in the district is actually higher than what is allowed. That's because that development existed prior to the comprehensive plan and zoning code coming into place. So I just wanted to point you to the fact that what is there today is today, even being as old as it is for the most part, higher than what the code and the comprehensive plan, which were set into place with incorporation, were envisioned. Okay. I'm sure you're going to have questions about that. We'll try to tackle those when we come to the end. I'm going to show you just a few highlights from our public input process. When we went out in all the forms that we went out to the public, whether it was the pop-up outreach or the in-person workshop or the online surveys, we asked people what they liked about the town center today. We asked them if they liked it at all. We asked what they would change. We asked if they thought the regulations that are in place in terms of the overlay were still relevant. Do they even need to exist? Should they be replaced with something else? And these are just some of the things that we heard. Most of the people told us that they like the town center today. A sizable portion of those who participated also told us that they don't. But I will put a caveat on the yeses because a great number of people told us, yes, I like it today, but I would like to see it outdated in terms of architecture. I would like to see some changes to how accessible it is in terms of pedestrian or bicycle access and safe circulation, landscape. So there were a number of caveats that people put on their like of what the center is today. So I wanted to mention that because it is important. I think that people like having it there. They like having this idea of a town center, but they don't necessarily like how it looks today. Some people don't even necessarily like the kinds of businesses that were today. We asked about that. And I'll show you, I think maybe I have that in a moment. We asked them what they would like to see more of. People wanted to have a greater mix of retail, higher end stores, more restaurants, more places to hang out. Obviously, you know, that's kind of a difficult thing to do now, but, you know, there are design oriented ways that it can be accomplished. There's lots of ways that a good redesign could take advantage of outdoor dining, for example. We also, as you can see on the screen, asked people if they thought the current vision that is in the comprehensive plan for the town center remains relevant. And the majority of the people, upon reviewing, said yes. And that the city should keep the overlay designation, although perhaps there should be some tweaks. But by the same token, a good portion of the participants, a good share of the participants also told us, no, it's really not as relevant as it should be because it talks about a kind of development pattern that is not likely to happen. And the reason for that is because the current vision is one where way back when the comprehensive plan was written, I think it was envisioned that there might be like a single landowner, single developer that would come and get the entire area and do a master plan with streets crossing through and smaller blocks. And that's not really the reality that that area represents today. You have multiple landowners, you have development that is at different stages of their useful life, that is not likely to necessarily come into play at the same time. So a lot of the features of that vision may not be relevant today, and I think that people recognize that. One. So from all the conversation, there's more. This is just a couple of things. But we gathered a number of comments, a number of very interesting insights that gave us what we thought could be the foundation for a new vision, potentially. And the most important of those were that first, this area is different. It's different from pretty much the entire rest of the city. It's certainly different from the surrounding area. Many people said that this was like a breath of fresh air because it's like, you know, it's just a lung. People can go and they can breathe. They can see the sun. It's a different scale. So it feels livable, and anything that happens there, they would like to continue to feel it as livable. And by that, they mean that it would be human scale, that it would be accessible, that it would have an updated design, that it would still be open, that there would be green spaces. That was a big emphasis on input that we received, parks and greenways and other kinds of civic and open spaces to connect different parts of the district. With the distinctiveness and the livability come what people call the sense of this being an oasis for many among other parts of the city. And also the importance of it as being a destination because it serves as an activity center that covers a great number of functions within the city. So that's really important. And these were the elements that were used as a foundation for creating or identifying the strategies that we're going to present tonight. So I'm going to tell you how we did that really quick. First of all, we tried to focus on the issues at hand, meaning that even though we know that to most people, the question of density, intensity, and building height are really important and they're very emotional issues, that is not the issue that we're trying to resolve right now. We will resolve that because those are issues that have to be addressed. But the questions that we're addressing tonight and we have been addressing through this process are not those, but are the questions that I mentioned when I was telling you in that previous slide that talked about the actions that the city have taken. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out what needs to be the vision for this district and how can the city implement it in the comprehensive plan and later implement it in the zoning code through the measures that then can address issues of density, intensity, and building height. So we stayed on focus. We used the public input and the vision that came out of that to identify strategies that will be viable in terms of implementability and that would allow us to have a very clear vision of what steps would be involved for the city. So based on that, and I'm going to go through the scoring, the criteria that we used in a second, we identify 4 options. There may be more because this is not an exhaustive list, but based on the criteria that we identified, these are the 4 that we identify as viable. Now, these are not renderings. These are not drawings. These are not plans. This is not a master plan. These are very general regulatory concepts or policy concepts or approaches that we're presenting tonight to help the City Commission guide their decision making. Anything that is more specific or more detailed will come after this phase, okay? So I mentioned that we had some criteria that we used, and this was really important to us to come up with those criteria because we needed to be able to evaluate the pros and cons of the four choices that we have before us. And they're going to be the same four choices that you will have tonight in front of you. And the factors for scoring and selection had to do with whether the option or the strategy incorporated community input in a meaningful way, whether it allowed us to stay consistent with the policies in the comprehensive plan, that's really important, whether the strategy would allow the city legal defensibility, and whether the strategy is achievable within the limitations that we have or the city has of both resources and timeframes. And by timeframes, I'm going to tell you in a moment, but that really means that we have a moratorium in place, and that's going to expire. It has been extended to December. City could have the ability to extend it again. Maybe they will not do that. I don't know. But we eventually are going to see that expire, and we're going to have to move forward with making these decisions.
Just to clarify,
yes.
The moratorium has been extended until next year, March, the end of March.
Oh, okay. There you go. See, I didn't know that. We haven't talked about that lately. Well, okay. That is great because that gives us a little bit more time. But in any case, we have these four factors in front of us. The first one, as I mentioned, was the community input. And this was the most important to us. It had to do with all the input that we have been receiving through the community engagement process so far, and it will incorporate what we're receiving tonight. It's also important to reference in this factor all the common ground, not just all the input, because obviously there's going to be a lot of differences in opinion on that, but also the common ground that we have been able to identify through the process on specific topics or ideas that we have addressed. As you can see in our scale, all of the factors are being scored on a scale of 1 to 5. In this case, the response from the community may range from the least favorable or adverse to the most favorable. The next factor is risk. And this has to do with the potential of development rights, the legal and or fiscal ramifications to the city that could be a risk. And this was assessed in terms of an initial estimate that the Claudia's department has done of the potential impact on development of changes that could come out of each strategy, as well as feedback that we have received from the city attorney. Obviously, all of these factors, there may be things that change where we are in the scale, but these are the best possible factors and the best possible opinions that we can have at this time on what the risk is. There's also another factor, and that is that any change that occurs has to advance a legitimate public interest while allowing the property owners in the area to retain what would be an economically reasonable use of their land. So there's that sort of fine line that has to be balanced. For the next scoring factor, we're talking about complexity, and that has to do with the relative level of difficulty or exertion and the momentum that would be required on the part of the city to bring any one of these strategies to fruition. And it has to do with the number of parties that the city has to coordinate with, whether they're internal to the city or talking to outside agencies and stakeholders, the technical difficulty, the number of steps, the thresholds that have to be met, etc. And the scale can go from very high complexity to very low complexity. And obviously, the lower the complexity, the higher the score. The final factor that we're using is process expediency, and that had to do with how long the process is and how quickly we can go through it, how many steps we have. And that has to do with both the local city regulations and steps, charter, all of that, and the legislative requirements that may come from the state as to reviewing things that the city submits. And our ranking for that is in terms of being a very slow process to a very quick process, with the quicker one being preferred, because it means that the state is not necessarily reviewing so many different steps. There are other considerations, and I mentioned that these are not necessarily ones that we are trying to address tonight, but we need to keep them in mind. Obviously, there are density and intensity measures. I talked about the fact that today, these are not in the town center north overlay as it reads in the comprehensive plan, but these density and intensity measures are required by the Florida statutes. They need to be added at some point, and all the strategies that we're going to be presenting in a moment that retain the town center north as a concept would require the integration of density and intensity measures. We also need to think about building height. That's not necessarily something that happens in the comprehensive plan, but eventually it'll have to happen in the zoning code. And what we have been hearing from the public is that they actually like to have a mix of building forms and building mass, which are achieved from building height and other types of metrics that are used in zoning. We understood that there's some confusion about how building height is defined in the code today. And so we're making some recommendations to the city that instead of going for a measure in terms of linear feet, that we do it in terms of stories, which is easier for people to understand. We also need to add a definition of what a story is to the code, and simplify or eliminate the current element of the zoning code for the town center district, which is called the street frontage plan, because it's tremendously complex. And as I mentioned, it reflects a vision that is probably no longer achievable in this district anyway. But the final consideration for this is that we have to make sure that any strategy that the city considers also will include or will take into consideration guidelines that promote a higher bar of development quality. This was really important to everybody that participated in the process so far. Everybody wanted to see a district that continued to raise that bar. With regards to density and intensity, I wanted to make the distinction between building height and density. Building height doesn't define density, and density doesn't necessarily define building height. There's been, I think some point of contention on that, and some confusion. And as an example, I wanted to show you in the pictures that we have at the bottom right, the fact that there's these two projects, these two developments in the district today, Avila South and Plaza of the Americas. One of them is 5 stories. The other one is between 9 and 10 stories. I think there's variation in the buildings. But the density of these two is actually not just similar, but the density of Avenue South, which is only 5 stories, is higher than the density of the Plaza of the Americas. Some of you may be surprised by that. But the reason is that, of course, density is often a measure contingent on the size of the site, okay? So that really is what will determine what the density is. Okay, now we're going to jump straight into the 4 strategies. These are options. Right now, we're looking at these as strategies that are distinct and exclusive from each other. They're not interchangeable or combinable. But in this one, we're calling it, for the sake of putting a name to it, Let It Be. And what it does is it keeps the overlay district in the comprehensive plan as it is, or as it was originally intended, basically. To get to that, we don't change the boundary. It stays the way it is, as you can see in the map to the right. But the change is that we will have to add that density and intensity limit that we don't have today, because the Florida statutes require it when the city submitted the 2 separate overlays for the Town Center South and the Town Center North. DEO actually reminded us that these measures should be added. So that would be the one change. And then to make sure that the comprehensive plan, once that's done, and the zoning code remain consistent, the zoning code would have to be amended. Because right now there's only one large district that covers both the south and the north areas, and they would be different after this amendment is made. And so the zoning code will have to be amended to reflect that. This is a strategy that we have scored in terms of community response as being mostly favorable. A lot of people basically just said, yeah, just, we would prefer that it remain kind of the way it is. The risk is high because of the addition of the density and intensity. That could change the community response. It also could change how property owners there react. It's not terribly complex to do this. It will require an amendment to the comp plan, as I mentioned, and to the zoning code, but not necessarily to the future land use map, or perhaps not necessarily even to the zoning map. And it could be done relatively quickly. So this is the reason why in the cumulative score, this option or this strategy score relatively high. Let's go to the next one. We're going to completely the other extreme of the other one. And this one, basically, we would just toss it away. We would just eliminate the overlay in its entirety, leaving the 2 existing underlying land use districts, which are the medium to high density residential and the mixed use business land use districts, which I mentioned before, to guide future redevelopment. In other words, no longer there's an overlay. We would just use these 2 districts. If any development project comes into Claudia, she would review them using those densities and intensities. This would require an amendment to the comprehensive plan to eliminate the overlay. It would require an amendment to the future land use map to eliminate the overlay on that picture, and also to the zoning code and to the zoning map. So on this one, the community response is neutral. From everything that we have heard, the risk could be high in terms of some of those bonuses that we mentioned that perhaps property owners were counting on. Complexity is high also because of the number of steps that are required. And because of that and the different steps that have to be submitted to the state and all the different reviews, it's a relatively slow process. So for that reason, the cumulative score on this is a little bit lower. It's a 9 versus a 13 on the other one. The next one is, we're calling it a narrower focus. And what it means is that we would basically redefine the overlay. We would redraw it. And by redrawing it, what we would do is basically shrink it. One option is that it would apply only to the existing commercial area, meaning the properties that front on Collins Avenue, the ones that are in the red with the hatch in the map. It could also be that it is redrawn to apply only to the residential, but we don't know that at this point. If we did it with the commercial area being the only portion impacted by a future reduced overlay, then in the residential area, in this area that is in the pink here, any future projects would be controlled by the underlying designation, meaning the medium to high density residential. This strategy will require the city to amend the comprehensive plan, the future land use map, the zoning code, and the zoning map. So that means that this has a relatively high complexity. It's a relatively slow process, but from everything that we heard, and this is including the response that we had to our previous workshop, the community response would be favorable to this. It is the most favorable that we've heard. Most people that voted in the last workshop voted for this option, and the risk is relatively neutral. The final option, the final strategy we're looking at today is called a new vision for the purposes of just giving it a name, and it would involve creating a completely new district. What it would do is basically we would just eliminate the existing overlay, and instead we will create a new future land use base designation. This would be an amendment to the comprehensive plan. It would have its own density and intensity measures. It could have, separate and distinct principles to define a new vision. And it would require amending the comprehensive plan. It would require amending the future land use map, the zoning code, and the zoning map. So this one also has a high level of complexity from the technical side. It would have a pretty slow process going through the different state reviews. Risk is relatively neutral, and community response is relatively neutral. So the cumulative score on this one is a 9. Now, all of these scores obviously have to be taken both individually in terms of each factor as well as cumulative. I don't just want to suggest that the cumulative score is the only thing that you should look at. Okay, so this conversation may have, I hope it is clear, but it may have created some questions. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to go to this virtual Post-it note digital board. And I'm going to ask you to go. Claudia must have put yes, you have put the link in the chat. So I'm going to ask you to go. For those who already created a participant login when we did the warm-up, you should already be able to access this without having to create another login. I'm going to get out of this presentation mode. I'm going to stop sharing for a second while I go to my browser and share on the screen so that we can see what is happening. I'm going to share again. And as I mentioned before, we have some ground rules for participation in this exercise. They're at the top. You should be able to get them when you join, but be as concise as you can when you drag your notes to the board. Be thoughtful and be polite. You can make some comments, or you can ask questions here, and this will be part of our record. If you don't want to do it now, or if you find it difficult, hopefully you will know again. This is very easy to do. Let me just make sure that the board is open. You should be able to go on and drag your notes onto the board. Click on them twice to edit them. You can use the little ball on your mouse to zoom in and out of the board. We're going to stay on here for a few minutes. And I'd love to see some comments and questions come in.
If you have any questions, you can post it also in the sticky notes, and we will address them.
Some of you may be clicking more than once on the notes, and then and that creates a whole stack of them on the board, and that's okay. You can just get one of them and drag it. And if there are any left over that you don't edit, that's all right. I will put those aside. Anyone who's not who doesn't follow the ground rules, I, as the moderator, have the option of setting your note aside. So I beg you to to stick by the rules. We're going to spend a few minutes here.
Just to remind the attendees, the link is on the chat, so you can go to the chat, open it up, and click on the link. And if you did the warm-up exercise and logged in, you will be able to get into the board.
Right. Now, this board will remain open, as I mentioned before, over the next few days. So get familiar with the workings of it. If you can't think of something to put here tonight, you can do it later. It will be posted on the city's project webpage. So maybe we're just playing a little bit with it now.
Maybe you can, Sylvia, I don't know, you can recap on the taglines that we brought for each of the strategies.
Yes. So again, these are not master plan concepts. These are not renderings that we have in terms of, how buildings would look like or anything like that. These are not projects. These are high-level questions that have to do with both policy and regulation that the city is going to have to make decisions on in order to resolve the issue of the current discrepancy between the zoning code and the comprehensive plan with respect to this town center north area, right? So the four options that we have before us are let it be, which basically will maintain the concept of the overlay as it is in the comprehensive plan and as it was originally intended. In order for that to happen, the city would have to add the density and intensity measure that does not exist today, that was not in the comprehensive plan to begin with, that apparently was an oversight. And then the city would have to amend the zoning code to match whatever is done in the comprehensive plan. That's that one. Toss it away, basically just completely eliminates the overlay. What remains are the underlying districts. An overlay is something that goes on top of the underlying districts. It's like an extra, right? So we get rid of that, and any future development or redevelopment projects that could, over the lifetime of the district from here on to eternity, would be guided, would be regulated by these two underlying districts, the red and the pink, the mixed use business and the medium to high density. The zoning code would have to be amended to match that, because then there would be an inconsistency there. Narrower focus basically redraws the boundaries of the district to cover only a portion of it. In this case, we were thinking about the commercial area. That's what the majority of people said. That should be the one that really is addressed as the town center. The residential area, you probably should leave it alone. But it could also be, the opposite. It could be the residential area. So, there's that possibility. Whichever it is, the area that remains without the overlay will be controlled by the underlying land use district, whereas the area that has the new redrawn overlay would be controlled by the overlay, which would have its own density and intensity measure with a zoning district to match. And the new vision, the last one, would be basically doing away with the concept of an overlay, that kind of extra layer that we were talking about, and creating a new district that would replace the underlying districts that exist. So it would be something in place of the pink and the red. And it would have, again, new principles, new vision, new density and intensity measures, and the zoning code and the zoning map would have to match it. Okay? So, all right, I see notes going on, but not many that are
Sylvia, I think
comments
we
or
can
questions.
forward. Yes, there are some questions about how much longer, if we have any idea. We have scheduled this meeting.
No, I think that we're going to move away. This,
Yeah.
again, this is going to be open on the website if you want to go back to it. Now you have some time to play with it, so you know how it works, but we're going to move on, because the question that I want to get to, which is perhaps more important, I'm going to stop sharing here for a second, sharing my board, and go back to the presentation. Based on everything that I've said, and hopefully that gives you enough understanding. Hang on a second, what's happening now? I can't. Okay. For some reason, now I can't get the share my screen again.
There we go, Sylvia. Now we can see the presentation.
Correct. All right. So everything that we have been explaining, what I would like now is if you would, going back to the Pull Everywhere link on your web browser, and Claudia, if you wouldn't mind putting it back again on the chat for those, just go ahead and vote. Drop your pins on the option of your preference at this point. which of these strategies, based on what you know now, would you advise the commission to select? We're going to give it just a couple of minutes. Just to see. Okay. So you can see that people are beginning to drop in their pins. Okay. While you all do that, we're going to move forward because I want to wrap this up and get to the Q&A. So let me tell you what happens next. So I've been mentioning the fact that this workshop, this town hall, is not the last opportunity for you to participate or for others to participate, for those who couldn't attend today. So in the next day or two, there's going to be a recording of this meeting that is going to be posted on the project webpage. I think the city probably will have something on YouTube as well. We'll have a copy of the presentation posted there as well. The questions that we have been doing in Poll Everywhere, they will be posted there as a survey, and you can work on that. The Post-it note board will also be there. We will keep those open until midnight on October 25th. So if you have people who you know are interested in this process, who were not able to join us tonight, or that you know need to participate, let them know. And we're also continuing to accept written comments through the comment form that is in the project webpage. And that's the link that you see on the screen. Claudia, you may want to drop it into the chat if you would. Okay. So in addition to that, you can call Claudia's team or email her directly at this number and this email address that you see on the screen. This is also through October 25th.
There we go. The link is already posted also for the town center webpage.
Okay. And after that, we compile all the input that we receive from this period, from here until October 25th. We add it to all the input that we have been receiving through, all these past months since January. We put it into our final report. We translate that into recommendations that we're going to be making to the City Commission on November 19th. That's the date that Claudia has scheduled for our presentation to the City Commission. Hopefully on that day, the city can feel they have enough information to select one of these strategies to allow the staff to get direction in order to then proceed to prepare the corresponding comprehensive plan amendments and related zoning code amendments based on that direction. So that's what we have. And now I'm going to conclude. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much for your participation. And we'll open it to the questions. Claudia, or Mauricio, I'm not sure who is keeping track of all the Q&A. So
yes, so Sylvia, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the questions and comments that were submitted through the public comment speaker card.
Okay.
That was open up until before the start of the meeting.
Okay.
And we'll address the comments from the chat. And then if anyone still has any questions, they can raise their hand and ask it to speak.
Okay.
So,
and before we get into that, if we have some time, but if we don't get to answer all of the questions that have been coming in, we will do a written Q&A that we'll post with those questions. We'll be posting those to the website as well.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we're gonna start mentioning a comment that we got from Warren Stam. His address is 16001 Collins Avenue, 3204 Sunny Isles Beach, Florida. His comment is basically in opposition to the holding and having this meeting to discuss the Town Center North Overlay District. He represents a resident, Magali Gordo.
Okay.
And obviously they are in opposition to the whole issue that has to do with the Town Center.
Correct.
The next comment is from Tito Castillo. His address is 250 Sunny Isles Boulevard. And his comment is, I'm sorry. And again, all these comments are made part of the record in
Correct.
their entirety. So if anyone, wants a copy of anything that is brought up at this meeting, they can certainly request it.
Right.
So,
and there will be a record of that added to our report as well. So it will be part of a whole series of appendices that will have every piece of public engagement and public input that we get.
Absolutely. Okay, so Tito Castillo's comment is, "Dear sirs, I respectfully wish to ask if anyone at the city, county, or state level is seeing the amount of residential development in our city. Is there a comprehensive plan that we are adhering to? How is it possible that anyone may consider any type of changes that would possibly allow further developments? Right now, our city is pretty much a ghost town. Without doing any kind of objective studies, one would only have to walk in the evenings to clearly see a handful of lights in the many buildings along Collins Avenue and the west side of the city. If we had a 20% occupancy in those buildings, the city would simply collapse. People would spend hours getting out of their buildings. Schools would be insufficient, they are right now. Medical centers would be lacking. In case of evacuation, people would never be able to leave the city. Can anyone explain why there are conversations on this overlay or any potential residential developments when we should be spending resources on addressing roads, transportation, schooling, health, and how to avoid a complete collapse of our city?"
Okay. Thank you for that comment. I don't know, Claudia, if you want to take that one up or.
Sure. Definitely. Tito, thank you so much. You make a great point to the redevelopment, but exactly to that point we are here because today we have a set of regulations that it will allow a certain amount of density and intensity within the town center north district. Therefore, we need to go through this process to figure it out which way we can go to adjust that potential redevelopment. So that is exactly what we are doing today. It is regarding your concern of what kind of redevelopment we want in that area.
Yeah, and I would add to that the fact that this process is not contemplating any projects. We're
That's
not
correct.
looking at projects. There's no redevelopment planned or anything like that. But cities are not static things. Cities change over time, and the comprehensive plan attempts to create a guidance for how that change occurs, right? But the comprehensive plan cannot be static either because cities do change. And therefore, the comprehensive plan has to reflect those changes. Now, what we're trying to address here is not creating more opportunities or less opportunities for development, but solving a problem that presented itself with an inconsistency that has to be addressed because right now, with that, the city is not consistent with the requirements of state law. So that's precisely what is trying to, what this process is trying to solve. Okay?
Mauricio, you're muted.
Keep on?
Yeah,
Yes.
please.
Okay, the next comment comes from Ken Percy. His address is 200 Sunny Isles Boulevard, apartment 1504. His comment is, "I fully applaud the citizen engagement in determining the future development of our city. The question must be, is our future best served by continuing to make minor tweaks to development concepts of Norman Giller for the Gingold family? Or do we build a plant SIB confidently facing the future? Given the entrepreneurial nature of Harvey Baker Graves, Curtis Forder, and first generation of the Gingold family, I am sure that if they were still with us and able to vote, then they would most definitely opt for change. That is where the future always is. We may fear change, but when we suitably manage, it is the key to a safe, happy environment in which our children, grandchildren, heirs, and successors will be able to thrive and be successful. A new vision, creating a new district from scratch must be the way to go.
Okay, that's a very good comment. Thank you so much for that input. I think that if I'm just going to throw this out there, Claudia, you may have something that you want to add, but certainly there might be a different effort where the city would embark in creating more of a master plan for this area. I don't know whether that's something that would happen or not, but we have been hearing through this public engagement process that people want this area to be more walkable, more connected, more accessible, et cetera. And those are things that can happen outside of this process, because again, this is a pretty focused process on one specific issue. But we are definitely taking those issues into consideration, and they will be part of a series of principles that would constitute the vision and that could be integrated into the comprehensive plan, whether it is a new designation or ultimately a modified designation of this land use.
Definitely, Sylvia, I think you mentioned it throughout your presentation in regards that this area had a vision when it was created, basically 20 years ago. And ironically, that vision called for a very green, very open, with many roads crossing throughout the area to make it feasible and easier for pedestrians and bicyclists and different mode of transportations.
That is
Unfortunately,
correct.
exactly. But unfortunately, as you mentioned also, this master plan that is currently in the comprehensive plan, it's kind of unachievable because it envisions some sort of like a one land owner, or at least one I will say developer in that sense,
Right.
that it will bring this idea into
A
place.
holistic approach to
Correct,
it.
correct. So,
And the vision hasn't really changed in essentials. I think what has changed is the fact that the perspective from which that was coming, we have not, as a community, been able to realize it. And today is probably not achievable, as you said. And so that walkability, that connectivity, that accessibility has to be achieved by other means.
correct. So I think we heard a lot from the residents and different participants is that we want to keep those elements. We just need to figure it out which tool we're going to use to achieve those.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is correct. Okay. Next.
Okay, the next comment and final comment comes from Norman S. Edelcup. His address is 244 Atlantic Isle, Sunny Isles Beach, Florida. I believe that this town hall meeting regarding town center zoning discussions is inappropriate at this time, and as there is currently a legal challenge in the courts that must be first decided before the commission and the public can lawfully consider any changes to the town center district.
Thank you for your input.
Okay, that is the last speaker card that we received.
Okay.
Now we will go on over to the chat. So just bear with me 1 second because we did have a lot of back and forth. So
yeah.
1 second. Okay, this one is from Igor Vasiliev. I do not think that the city frontage plan is too complex and unachievable. It is a pretty standard thing in many cities and it works. It is really premature to dismiss it.
Okay, that's a fair point. I think that the conversation that Claudia and I just had about the original idea, that concept came from this notion that there would be a single, perhaps a single developer that would come in and buy the entire district and redevelop it as as a holistic project with the subdivision into blocks and the creation of new streets. And I understand what you're saying. I think that there may be streets in that street frontage plan that still could be achieved over time, but not all. And that's why I was suggesting that perhaps the street frontage plan needs to be simplified, perhaps not necessarily dismissed. But that's something that the city is going to have to decide after we resolve the issue of the inconsistency. Anything to add, Claudia?
I think you covered. I don't think so. A dismiss it would be appropriate, but more of a simplification, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, did you guys finish addressing that comment?
Yes.
I think so for now.
Okay. All right. The next comment is from the user Everton. And his comment is, and I believe when this comment came in, he was, I believe, speaking on one of the slides. I didn't catch which one it was, but we'll read it nonetheless. The size of the site and number of units included in that site, for example, 100 units at 1,200 square feet per unit or 50 units at 2,400 square feet per unit is the same site size, but totally different qualities of property.
You are absolutely correct. The density is set in the zoning code, and it may be, just consistent for a whole zoning district, but how it results in a different outcome has to do with the size of the site. But you're right that the number of units that go into a project relative to the size of the project, of the site, is what determines that. Correct.
I'm glad that actually you're bringing the quality aspect to it, because definitely depending on the density, it will differentiate the type of not only quantity but also the quality of the potential project.
Correct. And a very dense project may not necessarily be comprised of high buildings as well. So that's the other point that we were trying to make, to sort of create that distinction between the issue of building height and the issue of density. A very dense project may be achieved with lower and mid-rise buildings that are very attractive, and the opposite could happen. That's those are different factors. Okay. We have anything else?
Okay. Yes, we have one more comment. It's from Tito. Cities are not static, thus a plan should include roads, schools, medical facilities, etc. The vision has failed. There is only one road that is used by all, and it is not sufficient. Where are the roads?
You are correct. This is something that we heard over and over. We absolutely recognize that the circulation in that district is certainly not as it was envisioned. From that perspective, you may say that the vision failed. Again, we have been talking about why that might be. I mean, obviously there are different markets. When this vision was originally developed in the comprehensive plan all those years ago, there may have been entirely different development market, different conversations. I'm not aware, but presumably that's what happened. I think that there's still an opportunity to improve the circulation in that district through future redevelopment or other means. It may take a long time. It may be the commercial areas that have to provide those improvements. I don't know exactly, but yeah, you're correct. Right now, that's what we have, right? So, Claudia, I don't know if you want to add anything from the city's perspective.
Right, in a way, I agree with this comment. The vision as it has established has failed because we haven't seen that area to be redeveloped or take as it was expected. Um, so yeah, I agree.
That
We do have as part of the comprehensive plan um, elements that they cover for schools and for roads. So that's part also
that's correct.
the complement. Yes.
And obviously, this area cannot be addressed in terms of roads and circulations and facilities in a vacuum. It has to be connected to systems that are citywide, right? You can make improvements internally here, but the comprehensive plan thinks in terms of citywide systems as well. So, as Claudia says, there are other parts of the comprehensive plan that look at that. The city also has a transportation master plan and has parks and recreation master plan and other topical plans that address these issues in more detail. We have made sure to, and we have done this in our previous presentations, and we're doing it in our report to make sure that the commission understand and acknowledges that even though perhaps it was not in the narrower scope of this project to address those issues, but that people kept bringing them up and they're important and they should not be ignored. Anything else? Any other questions?
We just have one more comment, and it's from Tito also.
Okay.
So we'll read that into the record, and I believe that this is the last one. Love to hear how roads could be improved. Do not say clear solution unless buildings are torn down and there's space used for roads.
Tito, I think I love that one, but I don't think so that this project actually it will include that solution or how it could improve. I think we can be here until midnight talking, what we can do. I wish that we can be in one of those, city planning games where we can just go with the hammer and, start turning down and creating more roads and everything. As the area that we have that we actually receive, we are pretty restricted for the areas that we have, and we have to deal with private owners and private rights as well. So I think we need to find a balance when we deal all of that. But for this project, I don't think so. It is part of the scope to be disclosed.
And when we say, when Claudia says this project, she means the public engagement process that we're on. There's no development project that we're referring to specifically, because this is just about sort of creating whether you want to call it that new vision and putting in place the policies and the regulations that would go to represent that and to implement it. That's what the focus of this initiative is right now. Okay.
Okay.
I see Tito's last comment. I don't mind if the city wants to expand the scope. I'm willing to go and do this and talk about that more, for sure. I think that Claudia and surely myself would be happy to talk about opportunities. Tonight, we wanted to hear what people thought about these 4 different viable options in terms of policy and regulatory strategy. And the next phase would be to talk about those issues.
Definitely. Thank you, Sylvia, for
Thank you.
making this presentation, trying to make it as I will say two-way participation.
We try.
So I appreciate your efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for
thank you, everybody, for
today.
staying and participating throughout the presentation.
Stay
Great
tuned.
comments.
Yes.
Okay, we're
Good
good.
night, everybody.
I think we're
All right,
good.
good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.